Today, we're cracking a code, the culture code. We're going to dive into why things sometimes get so lost in translation, even when we're all technically speaking the same language. And we'll look at a framework that might just help make sense of it all.
Have you ever had that feeling? You walk out of a meeting with an international team, or you wrap up a project, and you just get the sense that something didn't quite land. You were all speaking English, but were you really speaking the same language?
Yeah, that feeling of disconnect. It's something that happens all the time in our global workplaces. It's that super frustrating feeling when the words themselves were clear, but the actual meaning just got lost somewhere along the way.
Maybe a task doesn't get done the way you expected, or you're in a meeting that just feels off. So what's going on here? Well, it turns out our cultural backgrounds could be playing this huge, often invisible role in why we're not connecting. The big question is, how do we make that invisible barrier visible?
Well, that's where the work of a social psychologist named Geert Hofstede comes into the picture. He developed this really fascinating framework that almost works like a diagnostic tool, helping us understand these cultural tripwires.
So this guy, Hofstede, spent decades researching how people communicate at work and in school all over the globe. And based on a massive amount of data from his work at IBM, he proposed a set of dimensions, think of them as criteria, to kind of map out the different communication styles of various cultures. In the end, he came up with 6 key dimensions. You can think of these as a kind of toolkit, right? A set of tools to help you become more aware of different cultural tendencies. So let's break them down.
First up, we have what he called the Power Distance Index.
So what does that mean? Basically, it's all about how a society handles power and inequality. The big question it asks is, are people okay with a clear hierarchy where everyone knows their place, or do they push for things to be more equal, with everyone having a say?
And you see this play out in really practical ways of work. In high-power distance cultures, decisions come from the top down. You use formal titles, it's Mr. or Ms. so-and-so, and you even see formal gestures like bowing. On the flip side, in low-power distance cultures, everyone's opinion is considered, first names are the norm, and the whole vibe is just way more relaxed. Okay, the second dimension. This one shifts our focus from power to how we see ourselves.
It's called individualism versus collectivism, and it really just boils down to one simple question. Is the focus on the I or the we?
Let me put it this way. In really individualist cultures, it's all about your personal needs, your privacy. You're expected to give and receive direct feedback. But flip that around, and in collectivist cultures, loyalty to the group is everything. The goal is to keep the harmony. So, calling someone out publicly is a huge no-no because it could bring shame to the whole group.
All right, let's move on to number 3. This one's all about what a society values.
This one's called masculinity versus femininity. And right off the bat, it's super important to say this has nothing to do with gender. Nope, it's about which values a society tends to prioritize. Things like competition and success, or things like empathy and collaboration.
So in what Hofstede called a masculine culture, there's a huge emphasis on being the best, on winning. In a conflict, the instinct might be to fight for your side. But in a more feminine culture, it's all about collaboration, about negotiation. You might even see a school give out an award for being the kindest student, which is a really different way of looking at success.
Okay, the last 3 dimensions add some really fascinating layers. Let's run through them. Number 4 is uncertainty avoidance. Basically, how okay is a culture with the unknown? Some prefer clear rules and predictability, while others are way more flexible. Then, number 5, long-term orientation. Is the focus on tradition and long-term payoff, or on getting quick results and adapting to change? And finally, number 6 is indulgence versus restraint. Does society say, go have fun, enjoy life? Or is it more about discipline and putting work before play?
Now, as useful as this model can be, it's not without its problems. In fact, it's pretty controversial, and some people argue it might actually do more harm than good.
And it really forces us to ask a huge question. Is it even fair or accurate to boil down these incredibly rich, complex, and diverse cultures into just a handful of scores on a chart?
The core argument against Hofstede's model is right here. Critics say it's just way too simple, and that it can easily lead to reducing all these different people to, well, stereotypes.
And when you dig into it, they have some pretty good points. First, it generalizes across millions of unique individuals. It also doesn't really account for how mobile we all are now. People travel, they move, and it kind of ignores the fact that many of us identify with more than one culture at a time. After all, a culture isn't a monolith.
It's made up of individuals.
So where does all this leave us? How should we think about this framework? Well, that brings us to the final and probably the most important takeaway.
Here's the bottom line. Hofstede's dimensions are best used as a lens, not a label. Think of them as a starting point for building your own awareness, a way to start asking better questions, not as a tool for putting people in boxes. It's about seeing general tendencies, not defining specific individuals.
And that's the big question I want to leave you with. Is this framework a helpful guide for navigating our messy, interconnected world? Or is it a dangerous oversimplification? The answer, it probably lies somewhere in the middle and depends entirely on how we choose to use it.